Welcome to Shadow of Truth with your host Dave Kranzler and Rory Hall, and we are very glad and very grateful to have back on the line Mr. Jeff Brown, our eyes and ears in Beijing, and he operates the website 44days.net, which is also the title of his book. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing great, guys. Wonderful to hear your all's voices.
Well, we're glad to have you back on because there is a ton going on over in your part of the world. How you doing, Dave?
Me, I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for asking.
You hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm hanging in. It's the extreme intervention going on in the markets right now kind of blows my mind.
They are becoming extremist. They need to be arrested immediately as extremists. And I have a beard now, and I could be arrested at any moment as a terrorist.
Yeah, you look like a Muslim terrorist, dude.
Well, just all that's required is a beard,
especially with that accent.
Oh my goodness. Well, Jeff, on a more serious note, the Spratly Islands have been in the news a lot lately, with the saber rattling coming out of the warmongers in Washington, D.C., and making all these outrageous claims that, that this is somehow a military base simply because they've installed an airstrip. And what's actually going on? Can you give us a boots on the ground report as far as what you're hearing and what you know about what's happening over there?
Well, as usual with China, you have to go back in history. Before 1949, Rand McNally maps, the flagship map company in the Western world, always showed the South China Sea and the Spratlys and the Parcel Islands as an integral part of mainland China. So this has never been in question. However, what happened is a guy by the name of Mao Zedong and a defiant group of idealists called the Communist Party of China took over, one of the largest countries in the world, and they kicked out all the Western colonialists and they kicked out the Japanese imperialists. And it changed world history, and the United States has never stopped trying to overthrow the Communist Party here. They continue to do so, and so as soon as they took over, all of a sudden those islands disappeared from the Rand McNally map, and things sort of stayed that way. There's a lot of other history about Taiwan and the Senkakus, with Japan. But to make a long story short, in the 1970s, they began to see that there were some natural resources in these islands. And it's actually the Filipinos who were the first country to start to occupy the islands. Some actor they had some actor that sailed a boat out there and planted a flag, I think in the mid 70s. And China, was preoccupied with building a nation at that time, and then Vietnam got in on the act, and of course the United States was pushing the Philippines and Vietnam and Malaysia to frustrate China by doing these occupations. And as of today, Vietnam occupies 25 islands, the Philippines occupy 10 islands, Malaysia occupies 7 islands, and China occupies 8 islands. And Taiwan also occupies islands. So there's 52 occupied islands, and China only occupies 8 of them. What about all those other countries? China occupies 8 of the 52 occupied islands. And so this is just American empire, the big bully who hates the communists, hates the Chinese, and cannot stand the fact that they do not lord over China's resources. And so it's just I wrote an article recently or did a podcast, and I said, China builds artificial islands, and and America sails ships. And so, what happened is China took two reefs. The reefs are sort of like, they may be exposed during low tide, but usually they're underwater. So they took these two reefs and they actually built these darn things, put 3-kilometer airstrips on them, lighthouses, housing, water, desalination plants and everything so that they can be occupied. And they don't want to militarize them. But what's happening is that the United States, because of all of their bluster and sailing the USS Lassen into these waters, they're going to force China to end up, militarizing them. But this is all part of America's, grand strategy to destabilize China, to divide Korea, Japan, the Philippines and China, keep them at odds with each other. The old divide and conquer philosophy. And but what's interesting, and this is a point that very, very few people know. We all know that the maritime limit is 12 nautical miles or 22 kilometers, and that is if it is a natural island. If it natural, it's always above the water and it was formed naturally. But the law of the sea states that if it's a reef, it is only 500 meters. And so what the United States did very cleverly is they stayed out of the 12-mile zone with the other islands in the area, and then sailed within 12 nautical miles of these two reefs. But technically, they didn't break any international law because artificial islands and reefs, reefs are 500 meters, but artificial islands are not. At this point, are not recognized because, of course, the law of the sea, was written back when there weren't any artificial islands, and so basically, what the United States did is they complied with law. I mean, they actually complied with law. So it's so hypocritical, because what about the 25 Vietnamese islands? What about the 10 Malaysian islands? What about the 10 Filipino islands? What about the islands occupied by Malaysia? They don't even, in the Western press, you would think that China is the only country occupying islands, and they weren't the first, and they are a minority, a tiny minority of the other countries that are all occupying these islands.
You're exactly right in what you just stated, because the only thing that we hear about over here are these Chinese islands. Are these islands that China is occupying, and they're causing all these problems, and we need to, like you said, be the big bully and show our dominance. Show them who's in charge. We're in charge, and you're not. And
also to wreck harmony in the region.
Exactly.
Pit Japan and Korea and the Philippines and China and Vietnam and Malaysia against each other. This has been going on for millennia. The old divide and conquer, the old imperial strategy.
Well, these criminals, these war criminals, these warmongers, they're not going to be happy until they get what they want, which is a war.
And then last week, the Philippines. Okay, here's how it works. The United Nations has a tribunal called the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. ITLOST, and it is to arbitrate all maritime disputes, all maritime demarcations, etc. So, for example, Russia last year went to ITLOST. It takes years and years and years, presenting documents and maps and, everything else. But Russia won a huge, massive chunk of the Arctic Sea by going to ITLOST and showing, the continental shelf. And if all of these claimants, including China, went to ITLOST, China would win. because China has been sailing for 2,000 years. And there are the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Islands are mentioned and named in documents going back to the Han Dynasty in 200 BC.
Good Lord.
And the Paracels actually have archaeological digs, Chinese archaeological digs going back to the Tang Dynasty in the 6th century. The Spratlys, I mean, all these islands have been used by the Chinese for fishing, and there are all over the Spratlys there are Chinese ships, on the ocean bottom.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, Dave.
Obviously, beneath all of the rhetoric, there's got to be what is the economic variable here that's motivating the U.S.? I mean, I know there's the imperialism and all that other stuff, and they can't control China and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of that though is sort of cover for there's got to be some sort of economic interests involved here as to why the U.S. would care about this area of the world at all.
Well, just this week, I don't know if you all heard, but Li Keqiang, the premier, which is sort of like the vice president, much more powerful than, a Joe Biden. He was in Seoul with Shinzo Abe from Japan and President Park in South Korea, having a trilateral meeting together. Of course, Japan and China and South Korea are trying to form a free trade zone. They're negotiating that. The Americans, of course, don't want that. And also, in answer to the appallingly, bad TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which should actually be called Total Plunder and Pillage, that's which excluded China. China has what they call their RCEP, which is Regional Cooperation Economic Partnership, I think, and that includes almost all the countries in Asia. So they were trying to get that. They're trying to get that signed by next year to combat the TPP. So I think, Dave, what it is that the United States wants to keep Japan and Korea and China from forming a partnership, because those three countries alone represent 20% of the world's GDP, 20% of the world's foreign direct investment, 20% of the world's people, 47% of the world's foreign exchange reserves, which unfortunately are mostly U.S. Treasury debt. But, right now, Japan and Korea are allied and basically are militarily occupied, countries of the United States. And so by going into these islands and causing all this havoc, it helps destabilize any thought of China, Japan, and South Korea working closer together, cooperating together, doing good things. And so I think that is the big impetus. And then they can use a lackey country like the Philippines, which is bought and sold, by the United States. They just bribe all the officials over there and get whatever they want passed in the legislature. And, and so I think it is just simply a divide and conquer thing. Keep, Japan and South Korea, looking to the United States instead of China. And so the Spratlys and the Paracels and the Senkaku Islands are all just another way to just, hurt China politically, which in turn hurts China economically, at least in theory, but I don't think it's working.
But I mean, is this like a strategic shipping lane, where the
No. It's crazy to look at go on my website and and Google brouhaha. I wrote an article, the South China, the brouhaha, or just Google South China Sea on my website. I even put a map with all the islands of Vietnam and Malaysia and Taiwan and China and the Philippines that show all the islands that are occupied. You'd be crazy to sail a ship through there. It's like a minefield of reefs and islets and islands. No one even goes in there. It's like literally sailing through a minefield. The South China Sea is so big you sail it by them, but you would never sail a ship through there. It's too dangerous.
Well, the thing is,
go ahead.
Are these people, is the leadership of Japan and South Korea, are they so stupid and so bought and paid for by the U.S. that they can't see what's happening?
Well, I think they can. President Park. She actually came to the parade here on September 3rd and sat with Putin, and she at the big September 3rd, 70th anniversary anti-fascist parade here. Japan did not send anybody except a low-level attaché from the embassy. So, and President Park speaks Chinese. So she showed a lot of moxie to stand up to the United States and come to that parade, because the United States just browbeat her not to come, and she did anyway. I think she's a pretty amazing woman. Shinzo Abe is he's just a nationalist anyway. He's a nationalist, Japanese nationalist in the first place. But he is taking his orders from Washington.
Yes.
They have a peaceful constitution, a non-aggression constitution, a non-militarization constitution, and the United States is pushing Japan, and they've actually passed legislation to abrogate the clauses in the Constitution, I guess amendments you would call them, to remilitarize Japan. And this is, we cannot forget, Japan brutally occupied, raped, and pillaged Korea, Taiwan, and mainland China,
yes,
starting in 1894 until 1945. Thousands of sex slaves, Korean sex slaves. So, I think Mrs. Park, she is aligning herself as best as she can with China. But my gosh, they've got 30,000 American soldiers occupying a country the size of Indiana on 9 military bases. Imagine Indiana with 9 military bases and 30,000 Chinese soldiers. And that's what South Korea is. Japan is the size of California and has 90 American bases and 50,000 soldiers. So imagine a California with 90 Chinese military bases and 50,000 PLA soldiers. That's Japan. So unfortunately, these countries they're occupied. They are militarily occupied by the United States. So there's only so much, and they're never going to leave until the empire falls. They're never going to leave. Even if North Korea became, the next, Ayn Rand, capitalist jungle, they will never leave, because it's not about North Korea. It is about communist China, and it is about containing and controlling and trying to overthrow the Communist Party. That has dictated American Vietnam. I mean, just on and on and on. It was not about Vietnam. It was about trying to destabilize and put soldiers on the border with China and North Korea, and missiles and atomic bombs, etc., on China's southern flank. It didn't work, but that's basically what has been driving American policy in Asia since the communists took over in 1949.
It's pretty incredible. So maybe, it really just sounds military/political, because it doesn't really seem like there's any economic motivation for the U.S. to want to.
Well, there's no economic benefit to the United States, but there is the hope that it will wreck China's economic and regional aspirations for regional peace and stability. They will never stop trying to destroy China as long as the Communist Party is in power, and the Communist Party in China is so well run and is not, well, there's corrupt officials, but there are many of those in the West too. But they are not motivated by profit. They're motivated by ideals and principles, and it's a well-run country. They run a good. They know statecraft. They know how to, they know how to handle statecraft. They know how to run a government and manage 1.3 billion people. And I don't see them going down in my lifetime. And, most Chinese dynasties have lasted 200 or 300 years, and I see the Communist Party lasting that long. So it's just, I think the American empire will collapse before the Chinese one does, and let's all hope that's what happens, because if it doesn't, we're heading towards World War III.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, guys, great to talk. Can't wait to see it on YouTube.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.